Hey Aries, thanks for joining me for your relationship and connections forecast for the next 2 weeks ahead, starting from the 28th of February on Pisces new moon, taking you all the way up to the total lunar eclipse in Virgo on the 14th of March. Now, what I'm going to be looking at in this short forecast is, let me just bring up the presentation. So I'm going to be looking at how you can I guess heal any relationships right now. Like you might be asking yourself, like, how can you get things going more smoothly with your partner, your family, your friends? What problems are coming up for you right now? Hopefully I'll be able to answer that. Are you satisfied with the level of intimacy you've got? If you're single, what are the best moments to connecting over this next couple of weeks? In particular, I'm going to be looking at your romantic partnerships and intimacy. So keywords might be what's influencing attraction, how you can communicate more lovingly, how you can deepen trust and let go a bit, be open to receive, maybe even an orgasm or two. Also, like friendship and social circles, like when to connect and step forwards, also when to step back, how you might want to co-create together. And then finally, family dynamics, how can you go from tension to grace and release? What about your responsibilities? What pain patterns are coming up? And how can you find freedom from your family patterns? So hopefully there'll be some useful things coming out of this reading to cover all of that. Anyway, let's have a look. So you might have already seen my overview for the next 2 weeks. Like I said, this is going to go a little bit deeper. The new moon is obviously setting the scene for this next 2 weeks, and it's very, very sensitive. It's very intuitive. You're probably not feeling as Aryan as usual. So you might find you're in a bit of a funk, and obviously that can have a knock-on effect in terms of our relationships. First thing I really want to have a look at in terms of like romantic partnerships, and that is like the ruler of your 7th house, which is Venus. What is she up to during this time? Now, she's actually going retrograde from the 2nd, but she's in your 1st house. We've also got your 5th house ruler, which is the sun. Your 5th house is all about intimacy, sexual intimacy, and the sort of playfulness that might come up. The 8th house ruler for you is Pluto and Mars. The 8th house has a lot to do with, your romance, but in particular the intimacy aspect of that. So both Mars and Pluto are really ruling your sexual energy. And then the relationship of Venus, your love planet, to Mars, in this particular 2 weeks will also give us quite a bit of information. So, yeah, in terms of romantic relationships and Venus going retrograde, you might feel like your relationships are stagnating a little bit at the moment, and that it's time to rethink them. When Venus is in the 1st house, I think that can bring in people who want to admire us, people who come closer to us. And you're probably not lost for people wanting to spend time with you. However, as Venus is coming into this 1st house, and Venus does represent your partners and things, it might feel like things are a little bit too close, that there's not enough space for you to be. And also with Venus going retrograde, you might be thinking, how can I create a bit more space? It feels like I need to do some thinking about what works. Venus going retrograde often shows a shift in our relationships, especially when she's ruling your 7th house, because there is this feeling of remembering better situations in the past. Now, the truth is, anything from the past is not necessarily for you, because it's part of your past. And so the past often does come up during this time, and you might very well be kind of tempted, or remembering the past only in good terms, and kind of forgetting some of the bad points. We tend to be quite nostalgic during this time as well. Venus also rules this part of your chart to do with money, but also how you feel and value yourself. So this retrograde, you may well find that you're not valuing yourself enough because of your partnerships, and because of how you feel in your partnerships. So I do think you're in a bit of a funk. That's not to say you're going to stay there. Definitely not. I actually think what's going on is going to be putting you in a much better situation for relationships. There's some really quite exciting aspects coming up with Venus, not quite just yet, but later on this year, for instance, when Venus is going to make a lovely conjunction with Mars, which she will do. Before that, she's actually going to make a conjunction with Jupiter, but that's a little bit further into the year. During those times, there's going to be a feeling of real intimacy and escape, when she makes a conjunction with Jupiter. So I wouldn't be too concerned about what's going on now, because I think whatever you're working out for yourself is going to put you in the right place to have more fun and more sort of expansiveness, later on, and also some much better sexual connections. However, there are also some good things in terms of relationships too. So, for instance, on the 1st, when the moon goes into Aries, the moon will come into a conjunction with Venus, and that will be one of those moments where you're able to connect in with your partner a lot more than usual. Actually, before that happens, the moon is going to go into a conjunction with Saturn. That can make us feel a little bit nervous and separated. However, when the moon connects with Neptune in the North Node, in between the 28th and the 1st, that's also a time when you're likely to have one of these kind of deep, almost out of body experiences. And, if you're being intimate at that time, you could have something really quite special, really quite outstanding. When the moon comes into a conjunction with Mercury as well, during this time, you're going to be able to talk things through a lot more effectively than usual. So, even though you're thinking about things, I do think there can be a lot of intimacy between the 28th and the 2nd in particular. So how to influence attraction and intimacy? I would say actually what's needed right now is to just put a little bit of space in between you and everyone else, just until you feel like you are coming back into your own body and knowing who you are. It's not something that happens, I don't think, so much with Aries. I think they know where they begin and where they end. However, with this new moon in Pisces going on and the sun going through this area, and so much sort of emphasis in this Pisces area, you could be forgiven for feeling a little bit confused. So how to influence attraction and intimacy? I think one thing important for you, especially in this first week, is to create a bit of space, go off on your own a little bit, and really feel into who you are. It's important to do things with your body. It's important to stretch and enjoy being in your body, like treat yourself to something that's going to help you feel good in yourself. Because once you are pulling away from that sense of closeness around you and getting back and knowing who you are and what you want, it's going to be a lot easier to know what's going on. So that's the first thing. In terms of deepening bonds over this next couple of weeks, there's a couple of other things I want to share. So around the 11th of, actually it's a little bit before then. Venus is going retrograde. Okay, yeah. So that's putting everything in flux a little bit. But the moon is going to be going when the moon goes into Taurus. I think this is a time to consider your value and also to consider being in receivership. So what I would advise around this time, and remember this is a Venus ruled sign, I would advise that you spend some time thinking about love languages and how you like to receive love. So for instance, there's lots of people that enjoy the sort of physical presence of people and also the tokens and doing things for other people, which helps you to feel like you're valued and helps others to feel valued too. If you have people, like if you're in an active relationship, I do think that when the moon is coming into this part of your chart, between the 3rd and the 5th, I think it's important to be more into reciprocity and seeing how you can be present for somebody, and also allow people to be present for you. Just so there is that feeling of worthiness, that feeling of deservability, so that people feel like they care and they matter. As the moon's coming into Gemini from the 5th to the 7th, the energies are a lot more lighthearted and it's much easier to connect with your partners. So for instance, when the moon comes into a conjunction with Jupiter, there should be a lovely feeling of well-being, and there's definitely a feeling of multiplication and amplification. So that's more, not so necessarily more about relationships, but I would say that's more of a time for friends and your social circles. I really think during this time when the moon is in a conjunction with Jupiter, the moon's in a lovely sextile to Mercury and also a sextile to Venus, you should be feeling lighthearted. You should be feeling quite chatty, quite talkative. And so, if you're not spending time with your local friends and your social circles, I think that during that time, you could do something maybe a bit more adventurous with your partner. I mean, if you were considering going dating, for instance, this would be quite a good date, like between the third and the between the 5th and the 7th. This would be a really good time to go on a first date because there's an openness about it. There's something kind of really exciting about it that creates a connection, a sense of community, a sense of support, a sense of friendship. And of course, all really good relationships start from those premises. So that would be a really nice time to consider dating or have a first date, or even, go out with your partner for a coffee or, get a light lunch or something. Now, when the moon is going into the sign of Cancer on the 7th, this is bringing your energy back home, and it's bringing your energy back into needing safety and security around you. Now, this could be a time when a lot of family stuff comes up because the 4th house rules the family. But the moon is making some quite difficult connections during this time. The first couple are the fact that the moon is going to be going into a square with Mercury and also Venus. Which can be a little bit challenging because you might find that the usual support you're feeling isn't coming up. What I would say is the moon moves really quite fast. And so don't take it personally if you feel that people are pulling away from you or feeling a little bit confrontational, or if indeed you feel that people are putting emotional demands on you. So there's less friendliness and there's a little bit of a frisson of tension. Try to sidestep it, try to avoid it. Don't walk into these kind of traps. The more you can sidestep the feeling of disconnection and the feeling that there might be something kind of irking you behind the scenes, I think the easier it will get, because as this goes on, the moon will connect with Mars, and that can bring up some big conversations. It can definitely act as a release, but Mars is also in a lovely trine with the Sun, and that is likely to help you feel a lot more energized. And the moon and the Sun trine is also going to be very, very helpful. So I do think there can be quite a clearing, but I wouldn't jump right in and do it. I would just, allow what arises earlier on, knowing that there will be a time coming up a little bit later. So for instance, you're more likely, on the 7th, I would kind of avoid the confrontations, avoid the irritations, because on the 8th, to me, it feels like there's a lovely clearing. Now, just beyond the 8th, the moon will go into a square with Chiron, and that can be very healing. It can bring up a sense of vulnerability. So what I would also say is be open to being vulnerable. Don't let your vulnerability stop you from being full in your clearing, because when you're not fully clearing, there is something harboring. And of course, there is a full moon, not just a full moon, but a flipping great big eclipse coming up. So it's important to allow that clearing to happen. And again, don't take it too personally. It's hard to do because there's a lot going on here. But please don't, try to stay in your power and not give it away with little disagreements. The Sun trine Mars is going to be fantastic, and I will be talking about this, in the career and ambitions forecast, because that's a pretty strong and good, useful indicator, and also in the personal growth and well-being. But the Sun in a trine with Mars is going to bring you your confidence back. It's a feeling, this is like coming in for a few days. And then it'll be easing off for a few days after. But it's so around, say from the 2nd until the 14th, it's a really great moment of feeling a bit of strength coming back to you, which should be really good. Yeah, and then and this is another good time to go dating if dating is what you're wanting to do, and also a time to move forwards in your friendships and social circles. So between the 9th and the 12th, we've got the moon in the 5th house, which has a lot to do with romance, has a lot to do with fun and being experimental, being a bit different. But it's also about doing what you love and focusing on what you love. And the really great thing about this position is the moon in a fellow fire sign. It's going to be in a trine with Mercury, in a trine with Venus, in a sextile with Jupiter. So it's really about the fun, feel good energies. And during that time, Mercury and Venus come into a conjunction. So, for instance, if you were going on a first date in this week ahead, I really think the 11th is a fantastic day. With the the growth phase of the waxing moon. The moon in Leo and this lovely Mercury conjunct Venus energy. It's all really, really working in your favor around that time. Last of all, as we're coming to the end of this waxing moon phase, the moon's going to head into Virgo, and that's when things start to come up and sort of irritate you. And so I can see sort of family irritations coming up at this time if you're not getting enough space between the people that you're living around and you. To me, we are at almost at the full moon, so things can get quite chaotic at home. And with a moon in Virgo, there is this tendency to be a bit nitpicky. At the same time, Saturn and the Sun are in a conjunction. So your energy is really, really focused and really, really serious. And also the fact it's in the 12th, you can feel really quite sort of almost sober and possibly a bit depressed. I'm not calling it sort of like depression, but sometimes when you have a bit of a low day. So I do think leading up to this total lunar eclipse, it feels like you're wanting to reel everything in and get back in control, almost like you've had a bit too much fun here and here. But all I would say in preparation to that is, yes, you've been through some changes. Yes, there's been some opportunities to connect and whatnot. Get everything sort of tighter and more controlled. Like thin out what you can, let things go, because if you've had a good date here, some good times here and some good times here, and if you've also enjoyed a good release in this time, then this Virgo energy is just about catching up, catching your breath and giving you your space to relax during this total lunar eclipse full moon, because it's a very, very high energy. In this next week, in this next forecast that will be coming up from the eclipse to the following new moon in Aries, there's going to be a lot more going on about relationships, intimate relationships, and sexual energy, this sort of intense intimacy. And also a lot more about friendships further away. What I really notice about this 2 weeks is it's much more close to home. It's much more what's already in existence. Whereas this, to me, is bringing up some much bigger patterns. So anyway, I hope that was helpful for you. Have a great related and connected time, and catch you in another reading real soon. Lots of love.